Good evening and welcome to part 2 of the federal budget process with the CUNY Academy. Building responsible voters, one video at a time. All right, moving forward, some examples of entitlements, okay? Make sure we have that definition from the previous slide. And here are some of your examples, okay? Social Security, Medicare are the two biggies. If you ever have to recall two entitlement programs, those are two pretty easy ones to remember because we pay into both of those. Medicaid, I've seen and not seen it as an entitlement program. It is a grant, so it is the federal and state government working together. The problem is the states are the ones that kind of determine the eligibility, not the federal government. So it's could or could not be considered an entitlement program. You're better off going with Medicare. Remember, Medicare is for the elderly, okay? And Medicaid is for the poor. The poor need the aid, the elderly need care. It's the easiest way to remember that one. All right, Veterans Administration programs, anything to help veterans is an entitlement program. Unemployment programs, okay, such as food stamps, WIC, things like that. And then retirement plans for federal employees are also entitlements, okay? So those are examples, and we know that they are guaranteed, defined by law, okay? Now, the positives to entitlements, okay? They provide needed benefits to American citizens. That's kind of important. Also, the government cannot delay or avoid payment in the budget. So each year they can't play games with people's income, essentially. They know they have to fund this. They have to pay for it, okay? As you can see, there's obviously some negatives that go along with that because Congress has no discretion, all right? Whatever the law says is what they have to pay. Congress can't say, oh, we're going to cut Social Security by 10% this year. They'd have to pass a new law to do so. Entitlements account for roughly 2/3 of the federal budget, okay? And you figure in about 20% for national defense, you're talking about 85% for those two things. That leaves very little money for what is called discretionary spending. Discretionary would be a great word for the word wall. See you on Wednesday morning. So a president or Congress has a lot less money to play with new programs because they have to spend all this money already, and we're already operating at a deficit. So they really can't keep a balanced budget that way. Okay, so the budget is proposed at the State of the Union message in January, early February. That's the president lays out his program, says this is what we're going to do. Okay, and then submits it to Congress shortly thereafter. Okay. President has an Office of Management and Budget, right, or OMB as it's called. This is how the process gets started. They contact all of the agencies, the DEA, the Border Security, Customs Houses, U.S. Marshal Service, any federal government programs. They say, what do you want, and give us your reasons for wanting it. So the agencies will send their requests in and say, this is how much we'd like, this is what we need. Usually they always operate as a percentage increase from the year before, okay? So if you got $10 million one year, you're going to ask for $11 million the next, okay? That's one of the problems. And then the Office of Management reviews the budget for the president and recommends, okay, this is going to create a deficit, this is going to be a surplus, this is going to hurt us, help us, and so on. So they're kind of his experts on the budget, his policymakers, if you will, okay? Now, Congress has an office called the CBO. We got the OMB for the President, Office of Management Budget. Congress has the Congressional Budget Office. President will submit a budget to Congress by the first week in February, saying this is what I'd like to have happen. Now, you heard on the video in class today, they haven't passed a budget in 4 years because they keep just passing continuing resolutions, which we'll get into. The CBA would look over the budget and then send reports to Congress. The CBO is kind of the agreed upon scorekeeper for both the president and Congress, that's what they're going to use, their projections and their analysis. So for example, with Obamacare, the CBO estimated that that would reduce the deficit, okay, because more people would be insured, so there'd be less federal money being spent on health care. So that was one example. They might do a study saying if you get rid of a tax deduction, for example, that's going to cost us X number of dollars and the deficit's going to grow by, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Then the Appropriations Committee is crucial. Now, there's an Appropriations Committee. We know there's a Ways and Means Committee that raises the money, and then there's a Budget Committee that kind of pieces everything together. But the Appropriations Committee will hold the hearings and set the targets. This is how much we want to spend in each of these particular areas. Those are just the goals, okay? If the budget does not meet the targets, then they have to pass what are called reconciliation bills, which is where they iron out the differences and work out the differences between the House and the Senate. These reconciliation bills cannot be filibustered because we are talking with a budget and we have to be able to spend that. So that's how the Obamacare was able to get passed, was they did it as a reconciliation bill, sticking it into a budget as opposed to doing it as an entirely new bill. Okay, like I told you, there were some shenanigans with how that went on. Okay? By October 1st, which is coming up, or all appropriations bills should be passed. Okay? We haven't met an October 1st deadline in 4 months. I don't see that happening anytime soon. Okay? And here you can kind of see the budget and surplus over the years here. Okay? A deficit is down here. This is where we are spending more money than we're taking in by definition. Okay? A surplus is what we had here, which everybody wants to attribute to this guy. Okay? I can give you stories on both sides of the equation on that one. Okay? But we did have about a 4-year period where we were taking in more money than we were spending. Okay? And then you see Bush had a surplus for 1 year, and then something called 9/11 happened. Plus, he gave a lot of that money back, arguing that we took too much of your money. We're going to give it back to you and as a stimulus check. So your parents probably in 2001 remember getting a $1,200 check from the president saying, you paid too much in taxes. Here you go back. All right? So if they do not pass something by October 1st, which is what is going to happen, Congress passes a continuing resolution where they run on last year's budget, and they do that for as long as Congress says so. Okay, so right now I believe they're funding the government through the end of November. So November is our next deadline to see if we're going to extend it, and if we do not, then the government gets shut down and there's no money to run the programs other than the essentials. Okay. Last thing here we'll talk about is some of the consequences of large budget deficits, which you can see has happened in the Bush years and is not going down all under Obama either. Is there's a large amount of interest that you have to pay back on that. Okay, interest is about 7% of our budget every year. Okay, when we're talking trillions of dollars, 7% is a large number, and it puts a huge burden on future generations. It does not mean that there's going to be tax increases. It doesn't mean that they're going to have to cut programs. It just means future generations are going to have to deal with that and make some sacrifices to pay it off. Okay, and you'll see in the simulation in class on Tuesday the debt and deficits that we're currently operating under. All right, so thank you so much for listening. Sorry this was 2 videos, but lots to get in. But this will let us get right into the activity in class on Tuesday. So thanks for listening to the Q&A Academy. And remember, politics is not a spectator sport.